Welcome to Supply Chain Now, the voice of global supply chain. Supply Chain Now focuses on the best in the business for our worldwide audience, the people, the technologies, the best practices, and today's critical issues, the challenges and opportunities. Stay tuned to hear from those making global business happen right here on Supply Chain Now.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Scott Luton with you here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's show. Today, we're continuing our series that we like to call the Now Generation, where we sit down with students and educators from some of the leading supply chain management programs really around the world. Now, with that said, I want to welcome our panel here today, starting with Dr. Jason Miller, professor at Michigan State University and repeat guest. Jason, how you doing?
Doing well. How you doing?
Doing wonderful. Great to have you back. We had such a great live stream discussion on the domestic freight markets with our friends at U.S. Bank a month or so ago. So enjoyed your perspective there.
Oh, thanks. I really enjoyed being on. It's hard to believe it's already been a month.
Can you believe that? And the best part is not only do we have you back, but we've got two of your brightest students and now practitioners, I'll call it, at Michigan State University. Starting with Ashley Yearwood, a senior at Michigan State in the Honors College, majoring in supply chain management and minoring in information technology and economics. Ashley is also president of the Supply Chain Management Association. Ashley, how you doing?
Doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Man, I don't know how you find any time. As I like to talk about these, it was pizza and beer for me when I was matriculating through college. So great to have you here, Ashley. And you're joined by Jacob Levac, also a senior at Michigan State, also majoring in supply chain management. And he serves, get this, as CFO on the executive board for the Supply Chain Management Association. Jacob, how you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Okay. So we've got, Jason, we've got quite a conversation teed up. Now, I'm assuming you have been rubbing elbows with Ashley and Jacob for quite some time now, huh?
Unfortunately, not as much as I would like, because I don't teach undergrad anymore now that I transition into the chairperson role. So I am strictly only teaching the graduate students at this point in time.
Well, that's no fun, huh?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I love teaching undergrad. A couple years from now, I'll be back to doing it. But yeah, this is my first year at Michigan State not teaching any undergrad sections.
Okay, man. Well, we'll talk more about your role in just a second. But I want to start, now that we've got everybody here, I want to start, one of my favorite questions to ask is, where is everybody from, right? Where they grew up. You always find out a lot about people when you start the conversation there. So, Jacob, let's start with you. Tell us where you grew up.
Well, first I want to start by thanks for having us. But I grew up in Canton, Michigan, so that's about 30 minutes outside of Detroit area. So go Lions. But it's small suburb outside of Detroit.
Okay.
Played a lot of soccer growing up.
A lot of soccer growing up. Obviously a big Detroit Lions fan. What about the Red Wings? Are you a big hockey fan?
Not as of recently, but I've been hearing they've been playing pretty well. I think the rebuild is on its way to the finish line, so we'll have to see. And Little Caesars Arena is a fun place to watch some hockey, watch some basketball too.
Okay, all right. So one final question. So Canton, Michigan. So if we were to venture up to Canton, Michigan, what is one place that we have to stop in and eat at?
Well, I'd stop to eat at. I'll tell you, you can eat here too. I think the only IKEA in Michigan is in Canton, and that's how I describe it. If somebody doesn't know where Canton is, I ask them, well, have you seen the IKEA off the freeway? It's like, yeah, that's Canton. So, but they do have good food there too, and it's a pretty good price. So I'd say IKEA.
Oh, man. Okay. All right. All you have to say is IKEA these days for so many people, right? So many consumers. There are devoted fans to IKEAs everywhere. Okay. Well, so Jacob is from Canton, Michigan. How about you, Ashley?
I'm from Lake Orion, Michigan.
Lake Orion. Now, where is that kind of geographically?
It's about an hour 15 from East Lansing, and then about less than an hour north of Detroit.
Okay. So that I bet the weather. What's colder weather-wise between Canton and Lake Orion, Ashley, you think?
I would have to say they're pretty similar.
Yeah.
We are a little bit further north than Canton, so if anything, I'd say we might be a smidge colder, but not by too much.
But it's all cold for someone from Georgia, I would imagine, right?
Yes, definitely.
So, growing up in Lake Orion, we'll get to food in just a second, but Jacob shared a couple of his sports alliances. How about you, Ashley?
I played golf in high school. I'm still really passionate about it. It's a great pastime of mine. Lake Orion's a beautiful town. Lots of golf courses. Love to golf with my family and friends there.
Okay. Who's your favorite golfer?
Ooh, that's a
Gotta
tough
pick
one.
one.
I really like Justin Thomas. I'd have to say he's my favorite.
Okay, fair enough. And then final question for you. Same question. If we stopped into Lake Orion, Michigan, and picked one place to eat at, what would that be?
I would say Sagebrush. It's
Okay.
our hometown Mexican restaurant, everyone's go-to downtown.
Do they have really good hot sauce?
They do have good hot sauce, yep. And surprisingly enough, their chicken tenders are really good for a Mexican restaurant. That is a go-to there.
All right. So, Jason, it sounds like when we're making pit stops in Canton and Lake Orion, we're going to eat some great Mexican food with some chicken tenders and pick up some very popular furniture. Jason, how's that sound? Sound like a road trip to me, huh?
Yeah, definitely wasn't what I was expecting.
So as I mentioned, Jason, you're not getting out of this question. I know we spoke a little about this on your last appearance with us, but where did you grow up, Jason?
I grew up in a little farm town in Northwest Ohio, honest to God, called Hicksville. I'm
Okay.
making that up. It's area code 43526. If anybody wants to throw it in Google, and it will pop up. About 3,500 people.
Man, okay. Well, so what was one thing you would call inseparable from your childhood growing up there in Hicksville, Ohio?
Oh boy, inseparable. I mean, it's just small town America. About the only, for me, I played baseball all through growing up, so I think that probably would be the big thing. But yeah, I honestly, even though I live only about 2.5 hours away from there, I haven't been back to Hicksville in about 4 years now, I think.
Okay. So, final question then, Jason. What position did you play on the baseball team?
Primarily pitched in first base.
Okay, man. Learn something new every day. Ashley, did you and Jacob know that about Jason?
No, I did not.
Okay. All right. We'll have a strikeout competition later on, maybe. But before we eat the Mexican food, Ashley there in Lake Orion. All right. So really quick, Jason, you alluded to it on the front end. Before we kind of dive more into kind of why supply chain, both for Ashley and Jacob, let's talk about your role, because you just mentioned on the front end how it's evolved a bit, and now you spend all of your time, it sounds like, with graduate students. Is that right?
Yeah, so probably the first almost misnomer that exists with what faculty do is, even as a quote unquote regular faculty member, I only spend about 25% of my time teaching. Most of it is spent doing academic research. And that's what I really specialize in primarily. But now I'm the interim chairperson for the department. So I am essentially running the department. We have about 45 total employees that I oversee then. I'm responsible for about 350 undergrads, actually about 375 undergrads per graduating class from our major, as well as our 2 PhD programs, as well as our Master's of Science in Supply Chain Management, plus a forthcoming graduate certificate program that will be starting in the fall. So right now, about 50% of my responsibility is administration, and only about 10% of my responsibility is teaching anymore.
Man, Ashley and Jacob, I don't know about y'all, but that made me tired just hearing Jason describe all of that. Man, full plate and then some. Well, given all of that, I really appreciate you being back with us here and bringing Ashley and Jacob with you. So let's stick with you, Ashley. One of my favorite questions to ask members of the now generation is, why supply chain? What made you say, hey, that's what I want to do?
That's a great question. So I came into college and I was an applied engineering major, which is specific to Michigan State. It's part engineering and then a concentration of your choice. And my concentration at the time was supply chain. And during my time, I was really involved my freshman year in the Supply Chain Management Association. And after going to those meetings on a biweekly basis and attending their events, I realized that that was the right path for me. I really enjoyed it. I found a lot of passion in that. So I fully switched my major to supply chain management after attending that club. And I've loved it ever since. It's a great decision.
So the club, the SCMA, and going there for the first time is what led you to pursuing a career of making it happen in global supply chain?
Yes, it has. It was, I'm still involved in the club. I love how it balances professional and social aspects. So you get a great view of supply chain as a professional in companies, and then also like bonding with other members with similar interests. I think it's amazing.
Wow. Okay. Jacob, how about you? Why supply chain for you?
Well, so I started as a packaging major at MSU. So that was in funny, not most colleges don't have packaging as a degree. And I really liked it. Really liked I was taking packaging 101, and there were aspects of supply chain management that were kind of shown in that classroom. I had a roommate who was a part of the SCMA, part of the club, popular motivator to join the club, and came to a couple of those meetings and really turned my ear. And I think the one thing I notice is, as a consumer and then going to see like manufacturing processes and distribution centers, touring a couple as a student, you have a rejuvenated respect for how companies go to get their stuff on the shelves and get stuff to consumers. So I'd say that's a big part of why supply chain for me.
Both of you are speaking to, you kind of have we're going to talk about Eureka moments in a minute, but that awareness, that epiphany, when you kind of uncovered what supply chain does, and so many, and of course, there's so many different definitions to that. But man, Jason, coming to you from that SCMA, that Supply Chain Management Association, that sounds like a very powerful program you have there at Michigan State.
Yeah, I would say it is the best undergrad student-run organization I've come across in my career, as both being an undergrad student and then getting a PhD at Ohio State and then being a faculty member at multiple universities. So it is incredibly well run. They're very modest here, but they hold their own career fair that is effectively as large as the college's career fair that we put on. So, wow. That just shows you how impressive of a student organization this is.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing that. And Ashley and Jacob, really appreciate y'all, the leadership and the blood, sweat, and tears that you go into making sure that other folks maybe have that same epiphany or that awareness that you had. It's been so impactful to your journeys. Jason, one other quick comment, and we'll get you to, and folks, if you're not connected with Dr. Jason Miller or following him, at least on LinkedIn, you're missing out. So much great content ranging from, as I mentioned, the freight market observations to e-commerce, consumer finance, and of course, all sorts of global supply chain analysis. When you heard, Jacob mentioned packaging. Now, a lot of folks may not think that packaging is sexy or insert whatever adjective there. It's really good to see packaging really get a ton more attention here in recent years. Would you agree, Jason?
No, it is. And Michigan State has an outstanding packaging program. It's one of the top programs in the country. There's I'm going to say, reasonably close relationship between the packaging program and the supply chain department. And it's absolutely essential major. I think some students get very surprised that packaging's essentially applied engineering. I think that's always the interesting thing, that we see, and it almost ends up being the supply chain major is the less mathy of the two. But no, it's an outstanding program. They've got great leadership over there, and they're looking at expanding essentially back to their former size, which if this all goes successful, they'll actually be larger than our program, which is one of the largest in the entire university in terms of undergraduate programs.
Man, that's great to hear. There's so many opportunities on so many different levels for packaging, not just packaging professionals, but just the art of packaging, I'll call it. So that's great to hear. All right. So Ashley, I want to circle back to you. So kind of using that as a segue, packaging, just one of, billions of topics that make up global supply chain. Ashley, what is one topic, trend, issue, you name it, across global supply chain that's got your attention, perhaps more than others right now?
I'm really interested in information technology and integrating technology in supply chains. I think after the COVID-19 pandemic, technology has proven to be the way of the world, at least for the future. I think it'll be really interesting in the coming years to see how we sustain that new technology sort of boom in supply chain, and then also like how we expand from that. And I think that's a really interesting aspect in the supply chain world right now.
I agree with you. And I would add to that the change management and almost the psychology of how the workforce handles all the rapid pace of technology and change and innovation. Would you agree, Ashley?
Yes, I definitely agree. And going off that, also like the automation aspect, whether that be in warehouses and handling and logistics, I think that's all extremely interesting.
Yeah, agreed. Before I go to Jacob, Jason, weigh in on that. Whether it's the change management aspect or automation, you name it. What sticks out there in Ashley's answer, Jason?
I think it's a change management aspect. I mean, we're even seeing that today in terms of how do you better have data-driven decision-making in organizations? And the key thing that some of the initial research on this that's coming out from economists at MIT who are using a lot of data the Census Bureau is collecting is you can have all the predictive analytics, for example, you can have folks running neural networks and doing all these things. But if you don't have the complementary organizational structures in place, nothing's going to happen. Or how do you convince people that to essentially accept the recommendation of something that for a non-statistician is a complete black box? And I think that that's, one of the things we're struggling with, not only in organizations, but even in our pedagogy and how we teach, is how much familiarity do we have our students learn with the methods, quote unquote, versus understanding the core content, the key interrelationships, and you append the methodology to it. And I think that's something we, continue to struggle with and also have vigorous debate about.
As we should, right? If we're not leaning into those frank discussions where we're challenging each other's opinions and perspectives, we're not moving industry forward. So I appreciate you sharing that, Jason. And thank you, Ashley. Plenty of stuff on your radar. Jacob, how about you? When you survey global supply chain right now, what's one topic that you're really dialed in on?
So it's kind of funny. We had a case competition a few months ago that actually SCMA puts on. I had the opportunity to compete in it, and it was involving how a OEM kind of stretches out their supply network and manufacturing practices. Where are they putting new production facilities in order to best meet demand? And I think the concept that was taken away from that case study was onshoring. And how are companies mitigating risk by onshoring as well as keeping the cost down? So for example, if you put a plant in the USA, it's a whole lot more expensive to operate the plant in the USA than it is in Taiwan or China or wherever, name an Asian country out there. So it's really interesting understanding how companies are there's a word to use it, but understanding the investment cost to do such, and then even operating labor. So that's definitely been interesting because it's the globalized supply chain is becoming a little less glorified after pandemic, all the buzzwords of the last 3 years.
Globalization, is that the word you just used there, Jacob?
Absolutely, yeah.
I love that one, and I agree with you. I think there's a lot more that's coming out of the blind spot as you set up and run and manage global supply chains that you've got to take into account for. I think and Jason, I'd love to get your view here. Supply chain leaders' approach to managing that risk of where you're going to source and how you're going to construct your global supply chains. That algorithm may be changing a little bit, and it may be one of the silver linings from the pandemic. But Jason, your thoughts?
No, I certainly think there's a realignment in certain industries that we're starting to see a realization that quicker time to market, being more local, China not being as cost competitive, and certainly now with the disruption we're seeing with this continual whack-a-mole with COVID. I mean, we're seeing Apple stock get hammered today for that very reason about concerns with a supplier. I will admit, I think there may be a little bit more hype to this than what we're actually going to eventually end up seeing, because there's a reality that for certain products, the parts ecosystem lives in East Asia. Take smartphones. So many components come from South Korea and Japan. If you just shift final assembly to Mexico, we're not really changing that. Versus there will be other things. So, Mattel's building a tremendously large facility in Mexico. That'll actually benefit U.S. manufacturers of plastic resins, those packaging materials that we were talking about, because we'll be a huge supplier of that, and Mexico will handle the final, labor-intensive assembly. So I certainly think that will be on the radar. I am curious to see, though, how much of what we have as nearshoring or reshoring is in fact just organic expansion. The facilities are kept overseas to serve those overseas markets, and it's more of just organic expansion.
Yeah, well said, Jason. And I may be oversimplifying, but one of the things I heard you share there is while cash continues to be king, right, as always, I guess the rule of thumb, but those who control raw supplies are also sitting pretty. So I'm going to ask you both. I'm going to ask all three of y'all for a eureka moment here in just a minute. And Ashley and Jacob, thanks for sharing some of the things you're tracking. How, going back to how you found supply chain, back to SCMA. Ashley, would you encourage some of our listeners that may be working their way through high school, or maybe in their first year of college or tech school, you name it? How much would you recommend a career in global supply chain?
I would 100% recommend it. I think it is so broad. There's a lot that you can do with it. You can touch any industry that you're interested in. You can really do a whole breadth of things with the degree, and especially in a technical path, it touches that. It can touch sustainability. It can touch a lot of different aspects that you might be interested in. And I think that background knowledge is extremely important to have. And especially as a freshman or a high school student, just introducing yourself to it. I wasn't sure what supply chain was in high school. And like I said, the SCMA really introduced me to what it was. So I think it doesn't hurt to just see what it entails, because chances are it'll touch your career path. Ashley,
well said. And to our listeners out there, it's okay if you don't know. It's okay. Lean into that. And hey, if you even after a really effective introduction to supply chain management and a piece of pizza and a good beer, and it's not your thing, that's okay too. But check it out. Make sure you kick the tires. Jacob, would you invite the same thing?
Absolutely. The thing too is like supply chain hasn't been a forefront news buzzword for, it's very recent. And as a result of the problems and of the new challenges that come about, there's a lot of job opportunities, and like Ashley was saying, just about every industry imaginable. So the variety of job descriptions and problem solving opportunities are demanding students. So there's opportunities all over the place.
I completely agree. And consumers are, as we all know, they're really smart. They've got more data at their fingertips than ever before. Kudos to them for figuring out what supply chain management means here in recent years, and that's going to be great for the profession, getting more talent in, as evidence right here in this conversation. Jason, before I shift gears over to Eureka Moments, your thought about if any of our listeners that may be considering kicking the tires on the supply chain management career.
Yeah, I mean, again, I would definitely highly recommend it. There's something for everyone. The jobs can range from, the traditional think about, General Motors, working in the auto sector, what we think of very much in Michigan. We've had students hired from Michigan State who go to Nike, whose job is to arrange photo shoots with professional athletes. And so they're in charge of all the logistics and all the procurement of everything you need to set up a professional photo shoot in the middle of Hawaii, as an example. And so there is something for everyone in the major. The pandemic really, I always joke, raised awareness that cows don't just fatten themselves up, slaughter themselves, turn themselves into steaks, and then ship themselves, to the local store, and or toilet paper doesn't, just grow on trees type of thing. And so I think that the awareness is there, even as we come out of things and, you give it 2 or 3 years. Will supply chain be showing up in the news as much as it is today? Maybe not, but we're never going to go back to a 2018, 2019 baseline level. And so I think that it's a profession where there's just so much more awareness, broadly defined, that it's a very safe career trajectory. I mean, we have near 100% job placement rate for students within 90 days of graduation out of MSU, and that's not going to change anytime soon.
That is outstanding. And we're going to talk about what makes the Michigan State University supply chain program so unique and successful and innovative here in a second. But before we do, and I liked your phrase there, Jason, toilet paper does not grow on trees, and consumers have figured that out now. Kidding aside, I tell you, that one topic, who would have thunk that we'd spend as much time and we'll have learned as much as we have, right? But be that as it may, let's talk for a second about eureka moments, right? And I want to circle back to Ashley. Ashley, especially if you look in the last couple of years, right? It doesn't have to be tied to the pandemic, but what's been a powerful eureka moment that you've had?
Yes, so I worked a student booth fair at the end of last year in the spring where incoming freshmen came, walked by all the different student organizations, and I was working the SCMA booth with a fellow executive board member. And I had a parent and a child come up and they were asking me about like the club and the school, and they said, "Oh, supply chain, like what are you going to do to fix that?" And I kind of laughed. I was like, "Oh, like what do you mean?" They're like, "Oh, what's the solution?" And I just sat there. I was like, there isn't a necessarily clear solution, but it made me think like that is my question to answer. That is my problem to solve. Like I am in my fellow classmates, like we're getting to that point in our careers when like we are the ones figuring that out. And I thought that was just a really powerful moment.
That's such a great one to start with because of the responsibility now that we have both realistically and maybe figuratively out in the market and consumers' minds. So really cool. Jacob, how about you? Eureka moment you've had in the last couple of years?
So 2 years ago or two summers ago, one of my internships was with a cherry pitting plant in Traverse City, Michigan. So top of the mitten, and it was a smaller operation. I think that year we did about 7 million pounds of pitted cherries, and my role there was involved with logistics, outbound management, transportation, and then some inventory, pack materials, just kind of watching inventory, making sure we can keep our production line running. And we had a fiasco where it involves suppliership performance. We had a supplier with granulated sugar come to us kind of last minute and say, "Hey, we can't fulfill this lead time. It's going to be pushed out months." And the cherry harvest is July to mid-August, so it's not a lot of time to work with when you have a lead time changing and delaying. So the eureka moment is this is problem solving. This is supply chain resiliency. This is what it looks like when you have to change and mitigate risk. So that was definitely like it was really stressful for for an intern to do it, but it definitely piqued my interest in saying, well, I'm kind of at the steering wheel with working on all this stuff. So that was, I'd say, like for supply chain sake, the big wow, I want to keep doing this, fixing problems. Dealing with
constraints, Jacob,
Yes.
right? And I'm hoping that didn't impact, I don't know if y'all happen to supply like cordial cherries, chocolate covered cherries, did it impact orders shipped?
No, we were able to just reroute to a different supplier in a very short period of time. It worked out really well. But so all the Sara Lee pies you see, like Sara Lee cherry pies, Conagra brand pies, those are all Michigan cherries for the most part. So yeah,
man, learn something new every day. I love that. All right, so Jason, first, if you would, before we get your Eureka moment, comment on what you heard there from Ashley and from Jacob. Ashley, where someone was looking for her superhero cape as a supply chain practitioner, and Jacob, talking about some of the constraints and some of the ways you've got to work around it, to keep things moving. Your thoughts on what they shared, and then your Eureka moment, Jason.
And I think those are two very good examples. I mean, we hear this all the time. There's this magical silver bullet out there that will resolve things. I advise several different senior level government agencies on supply chain content, and from time to time I hear the same thing. So there just has to be something we can do that'll cause the ports to work more efficiently. It's like we need to have a 30-minute conversation about why things are backed up. For example, in January of this last year, talking about LA and Long Beach. So I feel the pain there. Food factory stories, I love those. I used to work at a pickle factory when I was in high school, so I'm sure we can swap notes over the entertaining things that happen in food manufacturing.
Hey, really quick, I got to throw this in, Jason, because I did not work in a pickle factory, but growing up in Aiken, South Carolina, pickles were a homemade and otherwise were a daily part of our diet. And there's a great story that I'm gonna get their name wrong, but the gentleman that took Vlasic, the pickle company, to all-time heights. I want to say Joe Vlasic, but I could have that wrong. Anyway, he passed away a couple years ago, maybe within the last year or so. But one of his mantras he used within his overall organization was, give me good news fast, but give me bad news faster. And I mean, that is such a timeless approach to, I think, management and leadership and supply chain that I was so glad he shared. And all of his employers knew that was part of his MO. And Jason, having worked, I'm not sure if I've met anyone to ever work in a pickle plant. So you and I are going to have to compare notes because inquiring minds want to know how those operations work, Jason. But you were about to share your Eureka moment.
Yeah, so if I had to say a Eureka moment for me is really, I probably anger some of my colleagues saying this, but in a lot of ways, I'd say my Eureka moment with the pandemic is supply chain and economics are just not that distinct. And, I think that that's really affected how I teach, and that so much more of my teaching than, let's say, 4 years ago now focuses on things like how do markets behave? How does pricing behave? How do we think about industrial production? And really trying to, I'm going to say, repurpose a lot of information that exists for economists, but really it's directly affecting us as supply chain practitioners. And I think that that's, to me, sort of been the thing is, you look, markets work. They tend to do a fairly good job of behaving in ways they should behave. And I think that that's been, the challenge that many people have had with, inflationary forces, used cars going up the way they did and people getting upset. It's price gouging. It's just how consumers are behaving. That's what happens when you give people a tremendous amount of money and they can't spend it on services. And so I think for me, it's just been sort of this realization that I increasingly think, you almost can't really teach supply chain, especially as an academic, without at least being a quasi-economist, because you need to understand how all these pieces are moving, which is, why I'll be talking about credit card debt as I'm discussing what's going on in the retail sector, because those two are, very tightly linked to one another.
Jason, love that perspective, that kind of a different version of the butterfly effect, how everything impacts each other. And, actually circling back, because I think you're monitoring in economics, that'll be interesting for you moving forward to be well versed in those things, so you can see maybe more links than other supply chain practitioners, perhaps.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about Michigan State University and what makes the supply chain program so special. And I want to start with you, Jacob. I can't think enough. It's so cool to hear your earliest days of kind of becoming aware of what supply chain is and saying, that's what I want to do, right? The power of connection, the power of fellowship in some ways, going back to Supply Chain Management Association. But when you think kind of more general about the program, both the supply chain program and maybe the opportunities that university affords you, what makes the program so unique?
So I want to highlight two things. So the first one, and this is just a no-brainer, as a faculty, is our faculty within our department is amazing. I mean Jason Miller himself, and then everybody else included. For two reasons being, so one, I think and it's a cliche thing to say, well, you're not going to learn until you get into the workplace, more so, things like that. And I think professors and faculty are getting very good at becoming aware of the evolving business need, constantly changing, understanding ERP systems, understanding all the sorts of different tools, how to understand data. So I think in the classroom, it's becoming more apparent that professors understand business needs. And then other thing too is, faculty's constant pursuit to engage with students. So, for example, we have a professor going on a trip to the Panama Canal with 12 students. And that's just an example of how much professors really want students to learn about supply chain in the real world. And that's probably one of the best places to go to understand it. So otherwise that, and then we have a fantastic career management center. My resume is fixed up due to their help, and interview skills are really helpful. So, and that's something that I don't think other universities can quite flaunt like us,
Jacob, and based on what you submitted information to our team here, I take it that you're really to your point, you're big. You greatly appreciate that practical perspective, including some of your own, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Learn by doing, right? Okay, so Ashley, same question for you, and Jacob, did we get both of yours out? I'm making sure. Two big ones you're going to share about Michigan State University.
Yeah,
we tackle both
regarding the faculty, absolutely.
Okay, that's right. Faculty, yeah. That's right. How could I forget that one with Dr. Jason Miller with us? All right, so Ashley, how about you? What makes Michigan State University and especially its supply chain program so successful?
I definitely echo what Jacob said. I think our faculty is unmatched. They are extremely knowledgeable and put their students first. Jacob also touched on the real world application in the courses. The supply chain management program is organized sort of with three big umbrellas, being like procurement, purchasing, and then logistics, and then manufacturing. So it's really interesting. That's how you start off. Typically as a junior, you take those classes, so you get to see those three different realms. And then as a senior, you take a capstone class and you get into different elective courses based almost what you want to pursue, what you find interesting. So I think that's super valuable, like structure of the program, as well as the students. I just think that everyone in it has a passion to learn, super bright minds, and it's just great to be surrounded by amazing faculty and students.
It must be. Hey, sign me up for the next trip to the Panama Canal. Would y'all let me know? Talk about a great trip. Jason, that's got to be music to your ears, what Jacob and Ashley both have shared, and especially their common part of their answers, where they're touting the people they learn from and learn by doing with at Michigan State University. Your thoughts there, and then tell us what else you think makes the supply chain program so special.
I would start off first with the students. I think the students at MSU are some of the hardest working and most demanding of faculty that I have come across. But certainly the expectation, folks come here. It is a number one ranked program. It's been undergrad number one ranked by U.S. News and World Report for 12 years running, and that creates expectations. And I think the students hold that up, and they hold the faculty up to that. Same way graduate, I think we've been number one for about the last 6 years. And so I think that, the students having the expectations, the faculty really does, drive things. I would say, if I had to pick a second thing, it would be the breadth of faculty knowledge in this department is, I don't really think, equaled elsewhere. We're not the largest department that there is. There's other programs out there that are bigger than us. We're not the most detailed in one specific area that there is. My alma mater of Ohio State has almost double the logistics faculty members that I have in this department up here. But when you look at the just breadth of knowledge, industries covered, skill sets that exist, this place can, pretty much ball with anybody. And so we're very proud of that. I like to think that we still have an orientation that is both recognizing the changing business environment and, how do companies like a Facebook, for example, need supply chain talent, but it's still also, recognizing that manufacturing ain't going anywhere. Distributing product ain't going anywhere. And while it's really fun to talk about Uber driving people, and passenger transport, and we can't have half of our faculty researching that. And so I think that that's where, a lot of very applied real world problems get addressed by the faculty here. So it's the students and it's the faculty. And it's the programs, if I had to add one thing, this is, at least the logistics academic discipline is one of sort of the three founding programs, Michigan State, Ohio State, and Penn State, and the University of Maryland also coming in that conversation. So the program here, we've been around since the 1960s, which very few places can say.
Right. Long before supply chain was cool, right?
Yeah. Long before supply chain even was called supply chain.
So we're going to, one of my favorite parts here is we're going to get a sneak peek of what Ashley and Jacob are going to be up to and the impact they're going to be making, as well as some of Jason's favorite lessons learned or teaching learning moments in the classroom. But before that, Jason touched on something about expectations, right? And as he starting with students. So Ashley and Jacob, and Ashley, I want to stick with you here. When it comes to expectations of the top-ranked program that can ball with anybody, your thoughts there?
It's definitely intimidating, first off, but it's also empowering. I would say just having that recognition and then knowing the impact that you can make, I would say is so important. It's so valuable, and it just makes your work seem worthwhile.
And do folks, when they oh yeah, you're a supply chain major, oh, Michigan State University, they take those conversations differently when they hear that?
I have noticed that, especially in SCMA, when companies come, they are very excited to meet our students just because of the press that our school gets, and I think that's exciting as a student.
Jacob, your thoughts around whether it's expectations or kind of the prestige factor, we'll call it, with Michigan State University supply chain program. Your thoughts?
I think it's been kind of apparent for the last few years. As a student, coming with that, the structure of how our program is, there's so many tools that lead to where we get. All the student orgs, consulting student orgs, our student org, faculty. It's the expectation of students is very helped by all the tools that the program has and the university provides.
Okay, and it seems like y'all are empowered to expect the best at Michigan State. It's really cool. Thank you, Ashley and Jacob. Okay, so Jason, this has got to be one of your favorite parts too, because as they've gone through the program, you both, Ashley, you'll be graduating this spring, right?
Yes.
Spring 2023, and Jacob, you will be too, right?
Yes.
Okay. It's funny. Jacob kind of had to look down at his calendar to make sure. Is that right, Jay? I've been there, man.
Yeah, it's creeping up a little too fast.
I'm only kidding. All right. So, Ashley, what two-part question here. What impact do you want to have on industry, and what's some of your immediate next steps after you graduate?
The impact I want to have on the industry is just to make a mark. I know it sounds cliche, but I want my work to be valuable. I want it to be worthwhile. Um, I want it to have a good effect, not only on individuals, but just society as a whole, like how supply chains operate, how consumers like view supply chain, view the world. Next steps after graduation, I'm excited to join Accenture in Chicago. I interned with the company this summer, absolutely loved it, and I'm excited to be joining them full time as a consulting analyst.
That is outstanding. Congratulations, Ashley, man. And Jacob, how about you? Two-part question: the impact you want to have, and what's next?
So with the class work that I've had recently, one of my classes is strictly about SAP, and I think that is a tool that a lot of companies are using to vertically integrate. And so the vertical integration concept is kind of what I'm falling to, is something I want to continue, because a lot of big OEMs, big companies really want to keep striving to go as far up the supply chain as they can to understand the structures, resiliencies that they have. So that's what I want to strive to provide. Now, obviously, as a student, I don't know a whole lot about it yet, but we're going to get there. And so kind of next steps, after May 2023, I'll be going back to Caterpillar after I interned with them last summer, to do the leadership I can't even say it myself, leadership technical development program. So it's a 3-year program of supply chain management roles, 1 year each. They'll be moving around to different facilities. I don't know where I'm going yet, but that's kind of the fun of it. Is it's a little tour of the U.S. So
that is exciting, and we're having a little fun pre-show because I think I tried saying that 6 times and did not get it right, Jacob. So congrats. I tell you, having rubbed elbows and been in a couple different Caterpillar facilities and getting a sense of the culture, that has got to be exciting, not only to rejoin the culture, but with that rotational program, you're going to be able to kind of take the Baskin-Robbins approach maybe to how they do global supply chain, perhaps, huh?
Absolutely, yes.
That's awesome. Congrats, Ashley and Jacob. And then Jason, how exciting. I mean, I know, going back to your earlier comment that, most of an overwhelming percentage, I think close to 100% of students get placed within 90 days of their graduation, if I had that right, what you shared. So these are this is kind of examples of what happens anyway. But Jason, how cool is that, based on what they, the impact they want to have and what they want to do next? And then we'll get to, here in just a second, some of your favorite moments from the classroom.
No, it's absolutely great. I mean, it's always for me been fun to teach spring semester when folks are either already coming in with their job offers or those offers start to come in during the semester, and you can see the excitement. I mean, also the sadness. I mean, you are leaving and moving on to a different stage of life, and we almost recognize the 4-year undergrad experience as a completely unnatural thing that exists. But it's great, and again, it just speaks to the quality of students that we have here.
Agreed. Now, speaking of the quality of students, so when you think of some of your favorite moments there in the classroom, whether it's your previous role or your current role, what's 1 or 2 things that come to mind?
I think in terms of especially moments when I learned, I can at least share one from this fall where I was teaching our Master's Science Supply Chain. One of the students works for one of the big 4, the ABCDs of ag. So Archer Daniels Midland, Bunge, Conagra, or Louis Dreyfus. So one of those 4. And this individual mentions, I'm hearing something internally about water levels in the Mississippi River. And this is during a live lecture. And I'm like, okay, well, let's go see if we can dig up some data on this. And this was right before all the news outlets started talking about this. And then sure enough, we found some data from the Department of Agriculture, and we could just see the prices starting to skyrocket for barge transportation. I never thought of barge transportation. It didn't even register.
Right.
And then spent, a decent amount of time helping the student out, figuring out and, corralling all of this data to get a sense so she could take it back internally to her company and they could start making better decisions on grain pricing as they were looking at doing procurement. So those are the moments where, somebody says something about, this specific industry, and, you've no idea, but you just try to go, I'd say, learn on the fly, and things like that. Or just hearing especially stories, we've had some students go to Rivian, and just hearing their stories of working for a startup, light truck company, comparing it to the folks at Ford who work on the F-150 group. And I hate to say chuckle when they're like, oh, you call that production? We call that a month at one of our 5 plants that make these things. So it's just always interesting, too, to get those different perspectives.
Love it. Learn on the fly, apply, and then retry. Maybe a different take on the DMAIC cycle. Who knows? Okay. So, Jason, Ashley, and Jacob, I've really enjoyed our conversation here today. I really appreciate the time that y'all have given us. So let's do this. Let's make sure our listeners can connect with each of y'all. And Ashley, let's start with you. How can folks connect with you?
Yes, LinkedIn, Ashley Yearwood, and then also connecting with our MSU SCMA page on LinkedIn too.
Okay, wonderful. And Jacob?
I'll share the same, my LinkedIn page, Jacob Levac, and msuscma.com to see what we're doing every week. It's always something new.
Love that. I really appreciate the impact y'all are having on a couple different levels. And folks, to our listeners, we'll make it easy. You're one click away. I'll be in the episode page, so you can make it really easy to connect with Ashley, Jacob, and Jason. And Jason, how can folks connect with you?
Yeah, so again, LinkedIn, and or just go to our department's webpage, type in Michigan State Supply Chain, main page. It'll come up to me as interim chairperson, and just get in touch with me through email.
Well said. Okay, and thanks for coming back, and thanks for bringing a couple of your students as well. So big thanks to Dr. Jason Miller, professor at Michigan State University. Jason, thanks again.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us.
You bet. And Ashley Yearwood, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
You bet. And Jacob Levac, thanks for joining us here today.
Thank you very much, Scott.
All right, you have to keep in touch. Let us know. I'd love to hear what y'all are, what the next couple of years have in store. Undoubtedly, you'll be moving mountains, and we look forward to hearing all about it. So, folks, hopefully you've enjoyed this episode of the Now generation here on Supply Chain Now. Folks are already making a big impact, along with their professors and educational experts that help inspire them to do so. But hey, whatever you do, on behalf of our entire team here at Supply Chain Now, Scott Luton challenging you to do good, to give forward, and to be the change. And with that said, we'll see you next time right back here at Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for being a part of our Supply Chain Now community. Check out all of our programming at supplychainnow.com, and make sure you subscribe to Supply Chain Now anywhere you listen to podcasts. And follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. See you next time on Supply Chain Now.